Welcome to the Futurist Mindset Show. Today I have Reagan Rodriguez, and we're actually talking about the three ways, basically the three ways that you can become a futurist. So Reagan, can
Yes.
you, uh, obviously you're a futurist and you help families, basically help teach stratosphere wealthy legacy families how to become impact investors,
Yes.
which means you're a
Uh-huh.
futurist. And so just enlighten us a little bit about what that even means.
Sure, sure. Well, thank you, Tessa. And how are you today on this Friday afternoon? I know that you also, similar to me, have this high on Friday, if you will.
Yes, yes, I'm very good. I'm doing wonderful. And I love coming onto these shows to learn from you because every single show that we do, I learn
Uh-huh.
something new about how to be more futuristic.
Thank you, thank you. And for those of you that are watching, just to be clear, Tessa and I are not actually high. I meant we're on this high when we wake up on
Fridays are
Friday.
so much fun. Exactly. We're ready for the weekend.
So let me get started on that. If you're watching this live with us today, and maybe that's because you have an ability to look at the world around you. Maybe you might identify patterns that others might miss. Uh, when I say patterns, I mean beyond the status quo. And if so, then let's prepare for the future. That is what we're going to do today. We're going to look at trends. I'm going to talk about, as you mentioned, Tessa, three ways that you can start to think like a futurist. So, best way to answer that question, how you got started on that, Tessa, is by not answering that quite yet. The reason why I
So
say
you're
that
gonna
is
not answer it, yes.
it'll hit you better, right? You'll just kind of get it, understand better. So I'm going to go over three things that I do. So first, I'm going to talk about things that I do, and then hopefully, if you want, you can start to do these things as well. Okay, so
Perfect.
let's get into how to think like a futurist and how you can start to think like a futurist. So, what do futurists do? Because what they don't do is they don't predict the future, but they help make sure that individuals and maybe organizations are not surprised by what the future might bring. So, again, there's a big distinction between predicting the future, which nobody can do. All right, let me be clear. Nobody
Mhm,
can do that, including that psychic. They
mhm.
differ. Versus just being able to understand what might happen in the future and being able to, I think what you being prepared for that. Okay. I like to read and have recently been studying foresight futurism and have studied it at the University of Oxford. I was mentioning to Tessa yesterday, I think you and I talked, Tessa, and I was mentioning to you that I had met with somebody on Wednesday that has a master's degree in foresight futurism. And what was so interesting about this gentleman is he has a job, like an actual salary job with Google as a futurist. So he does scenario planning. And after speaking with this gentleman for over an hour, I realized that I don't know that much. Okay. He really went into depth. And I'm just now still studying foresight. And I literally learned something new. Yeah, almost every day. So let's jump into the three things that you can start doing every day to think like a futurist. Let's
Perfect.
start with number one, looking for signals. Number two, thinking of implications. And number three, exploring scenarios.
Perfect.
I know that, yeah, there we go. I was just about good. Tess, I was
Yep,
just
they're on
about to
there.
say that. Now, good, good, good. You did exactly what I was going to ask you to do. You read my mind. So by the end of today's session, I want you to say, hey, I'm a futurist as well. And you are. So one of the things that futurists do every single day is they look for signals. It's often called, I think the word that they use, it's called horizon scanning. So what that means is that you're looking for signs of something that's really kind of far out, a little distant kind of glimmers of something that might be bigger in the future. So how do you look for those signals? Some people read various publications, they read articles. My favorite way, what I have found to be the most effective, uh, this is how I look for signals, is I talk to a lot of people. So let me give you a real example for all of you. I have this YouTube show. It's called The Futurist Mindset. And every week I interview a new client or a former client that I've raised capital for their, humanitarian or alternative energy projects. So I don't know if Tessa, have you ever heard of this Futurist Mindset show?
I have. I have
Yeah.
the pleasure of being a part of it every single week.
And actually, I probably shouldn't have made a joke out of it. That's literally one of the ways that I do. So I'm serious on that. I have this Futurist Mindset show, and then on there, what do? I talk around related work about the future, right? The
Mhm.
future of work.
Always looking at
Yeah.
new technology. Mhm.
So think about this, Tessa. If you can imagine, I interview one entrepreneur every week we do on here. And in my case, I actually interview 2 or 3 people a week. So that's already 100 venture capitalists or hedge fund managers that I talk to every single year. I also speak at about 5 to 10 conferences a year. And that for me, talking and listening has been the most effective way to look at signals. I
Mhm.
can identify things that maybe a lot of business leaders are starting to talk about. So, for example, let's assume I read a book. I'm looking for the signals. Another example, I was at a conference in Puerto Rico back in 2016, and my goal was to ask questions and listen. And I noticed a lot of these executives would talk about employee experience. So to me, I look at that and I saw that there were little glimmers of it here and there, but it wasn't nearly as mainstream as it is now. So I noticed that there was a signal and I grabbed onto that. And then I thought it was going to be something that would be important in the future. And here we are 7 years later, and it is one of the most important things that organizations are focusing on. So look for the signals, talk to people, read, research reports, okay? And then see if there are any trends that are starting to pop up here and there. Tessa, I just have an intuition that maybe you wanted to add something or something that I said made you think of something. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just love the horizon scanning. I didn't think of it that way, but you're just looking, it's trends and collective information that you're looking for. And I love that you were 7 years ahead of what those trends are. We see that all the time now. People are defining their work environments based on what they want in their work. And so you were ahead of the game on that one. But that's exactly what I see you doing with all the companies that we meet with. You're seeing the technology, the newest technology that's coming out, whether that's AI or, medical devices, the wearable medical devices. Like you're seeing these trends way
Mhm.
before they happen. And also the trend in the environment too, and eco-friendliness. I love that you're ahead of the trends always on that edge. You said that you're looking for those things that are going to benefit the environment specifically. So I know that's a passion of yours, but you also see that that's where we're headed because we're going to use up our resources, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And Tessa, I also I know I had sent you a link of,
Yes.
and maybe you can put that later in the chat. We don't want to get people confused, but I'm specifically referring to the one about futurism, and one of the first kind of beginners, if we would say one of the first futurists of the world, one of the pioneers, was like, I think it was like back in 1537. And it was this Catholic Jesuit writer, I think his name was Francisco Ribera, and he proposed this kind of futurist view. He had to write. You can look this up.
Mhm.
Tessa will put that in the chat, but he put it under a pen name called Ben Ezra, and then his work ended up being banned, like by the Catholic Church. I think I read also the Lutherans didn't like it. There's other sectors within Christianity that didn't like his futurist. So I think what he is doing, again, I glanced through what I read yesterday and then sent it to you. But I think what he was doing is being a futurist towards reading the book of Revelation and saying, oh, this is what's going to happen next. So let me get back on topic. Number two, think of implications. So after you look for these signals and you identify what they might be, now you want to ask yourself, what does that actually mean? Or maybe what could it mean? So look at something like artificial intelligence, for example. Let's say we were 10, 15 years back in the early 2000s, and more conversations are starting to happen around artificial intelligence and what it might mean for jobs in the future work. So what does that mean as a futurist? One of the first things that you do is you start to examine artificial intelligence, what that might start to mean, right? What it starts meaning for jobs, for individuals, for humans. In other words, you take it one step further. Not just this is artificial intelligence, but oh, that's great, but what does that actually mean?
Mhm.
Where can it be applied? What are the impacts that it might have? And you need to make that one, right? Jump that one level further to start to try to, here's the word I'm wanting to use, connect the dots, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So again, step one, look for the signals. Once you identify those signals, now ask yourself, what do those signals mean if those signals become mainstream?
Right. So the impact of those signals, the implications it's going to have on the industry. Wonderful.
Very good. You said it better than I could have. That's right. So
No.
if those so if those signals, Tessa, become like that bright star, like the sun, what would that mean?
Mhm.
What are the potential implications that that might have? And that now brings us to the third thing that futurists do every day is they look at scenarios. My favorite analogy of this one is like a game of chess. Now, in a game of chess, one of the things that top grandmasters do is they start to think about what are the different potential moves that you could make. They don't just sit at a chessboard and say, okay, I'm going to make this move, and my opponent will make this move, and then I will make this move. That's not how their mind works. Instead, it's this is the move I'm going to make. My opponent might respond with this move, or with this move, or with this, or with that move. And if they respond with one of those moves, those meaning this and that, then this is how I'll respond. So, in other words, we're looking at different scenarios. You're looking at different possibilities instead of just trying to look at one. Again, we think about artificial intelligence. If you're just looking at one scenario, you might say artificial intelligence is going to take away millions of jobs. And if we're going to be walking, oh, yeah, yeah. And so now, see, if you do that, here's the scary thing. So if you say artificial intelligence is going to take away millions of jobs, if you're like me, then you know what? If I could do that, then I'm going to be walking around with a shotgun, pitchforks, like the, like the Walking Dead, right? And so you might plan everything in your life and everything for your business for that one scenario. But what happens if that scenario doesn't actually happen? What happens if instead we see new jobs that are created? Tessa, do you want to talk on that?
Oh
Did you
gosh,
see
I
a
love
change
this.
too?
No, you mentioned the chess players are looking, I think they
Mhm.
say 5 moves ahead. I've tried, I can only make like 2 moves ahead in my brain because it's so much work, but that's
Yeah.
what the futurists are looking at these scenarios, just like the gentleman that works for Google, that's his job is researching scenarios. But, the big thing is, though, I love what you said, you're not just getting tunnel vision on one scenario. I think that's the big picture for you, for futurists, is that they have to explore all the options, not just this one's the one that where I'm going to focus all my energy in on. That would end up in that Walking Dead kind of environment where everybody. So I think that that's really important. They're really pushing the future for all of us. They're saying, okay, what's the next thing that we have to react with? And yes, AI can take away some jobs, but it's going to, like you said, it really is going to create a lot because we can work faster. We have, I think the genes, it was decoding genes in, months versus years. So it's like tons of medical advancements can happen because of AI, but a lot of people are so tunnel vision on what they think the outcome is. So I love that you are forcing yourself to go beyond, what people can see, almost like, you know, you're imagining all the versions
Mhm.
of us that could happen.
That's good. I'm glad you added that. But yeah, yeah. So look, guys, the reality is that there is a great deal of abundance and productivity, and the economy flourishes.
Mhm.
But you've spent all your time and all your energy and all your resources assuming that you're going to be in trouble. Right? That's what doing that is.
Yes.
Like you said, thinking that we're going to be like the Walking Dead. So this is why it's important to think of different scenarios. So ask yourself several questions. Again, we can turn it back to artificial intelligence. What happens if a lot of jobs get replaced? What happens if everything stays the same, just like it is now? What happens if maybe a ton of new jobs are created and new opportunities start to emerge? So you can start to ask yourself these different questions. And when you ask yourself these questions, you'll start to notice that different scenarios might pop up.
Mhm.
This depends on the area that you're in. You might be marketing, you might be in operations, you might be working for yourself. So you're going to know the different questions that you should be asking. But that that wasn't a question. That was a statement. You listening to this, you will know the questions that you should be asking. And whatever those questions are, as Tessa said, don't fixate on one answer or one solution. Explore different scenarios. So just to recap, step 1, look for the signals. How do you do that? Talk to people, listen to podcasts, read publications that are out there, look at research reports, look at some of the trends that are starting to become more prevalent, and then try to understand what those trends are. Step 2, think of the implications. What do those trends mean? If you look at research reports and maybe only 3% of people are identifying as something being important, and then the next year the report comes out to it's 10% of people, and say 10% of people now say that it's important. Uh, are you guys now getting it?
Mhm.
Uh,
I see a trend.
Okay. Yeah. Imagine, extrapolate forward and assume 80% of the people say that that's important. So what are and that I think nowadays it seems like 80% of the stuff I see is on artificial intelligence,
Yes.
right? So that's the implications for whatever that thing might be. What's the impact that it might have? That's a good question to ask. And last, explore scenarios. Don't assume one scenario, don't assume one future. Remember that futurists don't predict the future. We anticipate some of the different possibilities and scenarios that might happen. Because there's a ton that I could say on this or could not. So imagine people get an entire master's degree in this. I just talked about 3 things in the span of just 15 minutes here. So
Mm,
I trust you found this informative,
yes.
useful, and valuable. And then last thing, Tessa, if you don't mind showing people, the first thing I'd like you to share with them is, meaning on the chat system,
Mhm.
uh, place maybe the Wikipedia page of the first early
Yes.
Christian writer. Put that one on there. And then next, I want people to know I didn't make this stuff up, right? It's not as if God came from the heaven and no, okay. I want to list the reference, guys. Okay. If there's anything I learned at Oxford is that you list the references. It's not cheating if you list the references. So I'd like you to list the TEDx talk that
Yes.
I told you I listened to. And guys, I listened to this last night 2 times. And it's this YouTube video is called You Don't Have to Be a Rocket Scientist to Be a Futurist. And it's a great talk because he mentioned that in the early 70s, his roommate was at Berkeley and his father was a futurist for the dispense system. I think it was for the state of California. And I'm not going to give it away. Just listen to the video, but it's very good. He's a well known actor. I don't know if you guys know him. His name is Harry Hamlin. He was in Clash of the Titans. He also won a bunch of spooky cases in LA Law. He's also in that show Mad Men. But as he
Oh.
says, truth be told, his real passion has to do less with his chosen profession and more to do with alternative energy, with science. So,
Mm.
what he is really doing now is a fashion solution to the world's biggest problem. Fast forward to minute 7. I know this might seem strange,
Mhm.
but I pick up on little details like this. So it was like minute 7, and I think it was like at second 38 or something. He
Okay.
tells the story. Now, I know that's weird. I'm like Rain Man sometimes. I see a little thing and it just stays in my mind. But he tells this great story. And then again, I just said that I wasn't going to give away the story, but I'm going to tell this little part. He's like in Rome, Italy, and this is 1980. And he gets invited to this cocktail party. And he meets this guy who identified himself as a Serbian born nuclear physicist. And this guy was like researching a new way to make electricity that was environmentally friendly. And guys, this was in 1980. So talk about a nuclear fusion and how that's what this guy was talking about. So he's like, I'm at this party and this guy's talking about this nuclear fusion and how the first atoms were hydrogen and that at the core of these hydrogens would release this energy. And he says that at the time he was like this hippie, right? He had long hair, bell bottoms. So although he might have been a dum dum to alternative energy, but this nuclear physicist noticed he was curious. So this started a friendship, and now I'm not going any further. You got to watch
Wow.
the video. Put that in. It's really good. And
It's
then
in.
also, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I put it in the chat, and then I'll have the last link ready for you too.
Thank you. And then the other thing, go ahead and put on there futurism.com and put that on there as well. I know I was
Mhm.
talking to you yesterday, Tessa, and I said, don't go to that website. And I was like, I'm so embarrassed. Don't go to that website because yesterday it had plastered women in that were half naked. And I'm like blushing because Tessa went to Google and she's looking at it. And I'm like, oh no, I don't
Well,
want you to think
it had that because somebody was creating AI people and saying he was their manager, so it's still very futuristic. It was so
it was. It
futurism.com
just,
is in the
right,
chat.
right.
It was funny.
We were just talking about it and you're Googling it. And I'm like, no, I don't want you to put that up there on the screen. But
They
today's
changed
is
their
much better.
cover. Exactly, they change the cover
Go,
every day.
go ahead. Can you show the cover today? What is the cover
Yes,
today? That
it
one's good. That's
is.
actually where I get a lot of my information from, guys. I read that
Oh,
every day.
yes, I'm sure I can put that one in the chat, but it might take just a
That's
second. Oh,
fine.
yes, the self-driving car that gets stuck in cement. Yes. So
Yeah.
you check this out for trends and opportunities. See if
Yeah.
that works.
On Wednesday, speaking of people I talked to on Wednesday, I spoke with a very well-known futurist. She used to work full-time, like salaried employee as a futurist at Lululemon.
Oh,
So
oh,
now
I didn't
she has,
know.
oh yeah, yeah. So when she asked me, do you know Lululemon? I'm like, seriously, I live in Miami. I mean, there's one on
Everyone
every
knows you.
corner. I mean, Lululemon, Miami just go together. So, but she has, oh, and she also does consulting. She does consulting as a futurist for Lego. For speaking of TEDx hires her as a futurist.
Wow. And this is just somebody
Yeah.
in your network. It's amazing your network is so strong, Regan. I think that's mostly what you make really strong relationships and keep those connections with people. And when you have for your clients over at Fifth Avenue, I know we don't have to dive into that, but that's you have a huge resource for all of your clients that you're working with for sure.
Well, let me say this. I have more social capital than I do net capital. You're right. So,
That's the important part, connecting the dots, like you said,
yeah.
for all of these opportunities, seeing where you can help, build up, help to sustain something that
Mhm.
might be the future for us in one of your scenarios. You've looked at it.
Yeah. So I think that's it.
All
We've
right.
gone over everything. Are there any questions in the chat that anyone
We
asked?
don't have any questions in the chat
Okay.
today, but I think we did a really good job covering some important topics. And so if you do have a question that comes up, let us know in the chat. We do keep an eye on the chat, the post, if anyone has a question after. And we're here every Friday at noon Eastern time, so you guys can join us for the next awesome show for the Futurist Mindset.
So thank you
All
so much, Tessa. You
right.
did a great job of hosting today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for being the great content that I get to showcase.
Yeah.
We'll
Awesome.
see you all next week. Bye.